Okay. Well, thanks for having me. This has kind of turned into one of my, I don't know, I'm super big on the soapbox when it comes to digital accessibility. And I shared my presentation in this way on purpose. I know it's a little odd that I've got the slides to the left and you can see in speaker's notes and whatever. But I'm planning on doing a couple little interactive things here. So it's easier to do that in presentation mode. You can't do that. So anyway, if it's too difficult or small to see, chime in and I'll switch it over. But anyway, again, I'm Scott Schroeder. I am the web and data manager for the Hazardous Materials and Waste Management Division at CDPHE. And as such, I got wind of digital accessibility because of the website work that I do and started talking to people about that around 2018 or so. And then here in Colorado, a law was passed in 2021 to really put everybody in line for digital accessibility as far as the government offices are concerned. And so it's kind of nice to talk to somebody outside of that realm, from the government into other spaces. So this is kind of neat. But what I plan on doing here today is just give a general overview. I hope it's not too simple, but I just wanted to kind of cover some of the basics, and then we'll take a look at some of the technology and go through some of the tools of the trade, some fundamental points that will make life a lot easier, and really just kind of what digital accessibility is. But the first thing I ran into when I started talking to people about this was, well, first of all, it was, what is this? What are you talking about? And then when we started delving into it further, the next question was, well, how many people are disabled, really? I mean, it can't be that many. We don't see that many. And what kind of disability you're talking about? So, when it comes to digital accessibility, we're not talking about entrances into buildings or automatic doors. That's physical access. But the same principles really are, in general, in play. Digital accessibility has to do with being able to read, work with, and interact with anything electronic. And in our world, that has become increasingly prevalent. We shop online, we order food online, we just do everything. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. To swing back, though, and these numbers are probably a little bit outdated by now, but it kind of is a little bit eye-opening. We have over 1 million Coloradans that have a disability. And we're talking about disabilities, again, like no sight, poor sight, deaf, also cognitive disabilities, things like dyslexia or dyscalculia. We have representatives from, people who have tremors, that have fine and gross motor skill disabilities, and any and all kinds of things like that. And over 40,000 Coloradans have a vision impairment. And we're not really talking about those of us who have to walk around with glasses. I can function well enough without them. Some people really can't. So there's a wide variety there. But if you think about especially that, as we get older, we tend to rely more on our glasses than we used to. At least some of us have. And, you age into disabilities. And that's another thing to remember. We all, if we're lucky enough to live long enough, we'll end up with one of these disabilities. We're going to have macular degeneration, or we're going to have cataracts, or we may end up being diagnosed with a disease or an illness that causes us to have motor skill issues. It could be any number of different things. I like to say that we're all basically one bad day away from having a serious disability. So this was something that we had to drive home pretty strongly, because this was the first question that people asked. Like I said, they were like, well, how many blind people are there really? Do we really have to worry about that? It can't be that many. And, the answer is, well, yeah, one is enough. That's all you need, is one person who can't see and can't interact with our website. And now we're in trouble. So it was an interesting set of conversations that I had in the beginning. It was everything from that to people were defiant and they can't tell us what to do, and that kind of thing. So it took a few years to get our particular, um, you know, I guess how do we say it? Our particular, kind of personnel, interestingly enough, to kind of get behind this. So again, just to drive it home, digital accessibility has to do with the ability to read, understand, collaborate with people, um, be a consumer, and could be a consumer of goods, it could be a consumer of information, it could be um, taking advantage of government programs. It could be something as simple as things that we tend to take advantage of, like renewing our driver's licenses online instead of having to go down to the building. Ordering a pizza with an app. There was a certain very large pizza company that got themselves into a lot of hot water here a few years ago because somebody who was blind couldn't use their app to order a pizza, and they ended up getting sued. So it's all of this everyday stuff. It is everything that we interact with as far as anything that's digital. And here's why it matters. Like I said before, especially now that we have a law, people will lean into that. And, all it takes is one person to cry foul. And then you're really set up for a lot of trouble. But, besides it's a law, it's really a civil right. And it's a human right. And it's really the right thing to do. And ultimately, it enhances everyone's life. If you think about physical disabilities, think about curb cutouts. Those were designed for people in wheelchairs or, people who were using walkers or even canes. It made it easier for them to step up onto a sidewalk. Well, we use them too, right? Especially if we're hauling a bag or dragging something behind us, we go to that curb cutout and it's easier for us to get around as well. Those automatic doors, if you've got your hands full with something, you can, smack that button with your elbow and gain access to the building. So accessibility actually makes all of our lives better. And it does so if it's done well, kind of in the background. You don't really think about it until it's not there. And that's really what it's about. So some main points here, just of what you can provide thinking about digital accessibility. It definitely enhances your user experience, your websites, your pamphlets, your social media. It reaches more stakeholders, and it improves the functionality of your web content. It actually improves your reputation in the community, and it helps non-disabled people as well. So let's take a look at the tools of the trade. Some basic ones. The first one is JAWS. Most of us have heard JAWS work at some point in our lives. It's usually so fast that we can't understand it at all. It's amazing. People who are blind and screen reader users, that they can decipher how fast that thing can go. They can decipher it like no other, and there's no way we could even understand it. But JAWS is probably the gold standard for digital accessibility, because once you kind of get everything to work for JAWS, 90% of your work is done. And we'll talk about that other 10% here. But JAWS is really common. It's one of the better ones out there for screen readers. Dolphin Supernova, magnifies screens. Literally looks like a magnifying glass that person can move around on their screen. And that's for people who have low vision, obviously, but also people who have certain other cognitive disabilities tend to draw to that as well. So this is one of those situations where you have to keep in mind, it looks great now, but if you magnify it to 200%, does it still look good? Have we lost clarity? Are we not using images that are high resolution enough? That kind of thing. Dragon allows people to control a computer with their voice. And it started out as a speech to text kind of thing where you could dictate. And then it kind of turned more into you could actually tell the computer what you need it to do for you. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the author Terry Pratchett. Um, he was his stuff was really funny, kind of quirky, pretty famous, but he, overseas especially. As he got older, he had a few books he was trying to finish up, but he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and so he ended up using a speech to text kind of program like Dragon to finish out his last books instead of relying on typing. So again, an example of how somebody has aged into a disability and they can't do things the way they used to. And then, of course, they have modified mouse and keyboard sets. And, we've seen all kinds of technology coming up where, quadriplegics will use a rod that they use with their mouth. And they can, move a cursor like it's a mouse, or they even have eye tracking programs now, which is crazy cool. So the technology is always building. And as I mentioned, we kind of go through JAWS. We use JAWS a lot because, again, if we can get JAWS to read something well, you're really, really close to being really digitally accessible. So what can JAWS do? It extracts lists of hyperlinks and headings and pulls them out into lists for people, which is a great way for somebody who's blind to scan a document, for example, especially if it's really long. It may or may not even have a table of contents. So this is a way that we do it. We don't even really realize we do it, but we'll scroll down through a document or through a web page and kind of take a look at the headings and see what this thing is made up of. Or we'll take a look at the links and see where the links are going to take us. This is a really important piece of technology for people who are blind because it keeps them from having to go through a document or a web page word by word by word. They may be able to find right what they're looking for in the first few seconds and go straight there. What that does do, however, is it creates a different standard to which we have to use for hyperlinks. If you're familiar with the way people kind of still do, but often did in the past with hyperlinks, and they would say, click here, or, find the guidance document here. And then the word here would just be the link. But if you take all of those out and put them in a list, they're out of context. And so then when the person is listening to what the list of links is, it just says click here, click here, click here, click here, and there's no way to know where any of those links take them. So now suddenly we have to be better at creating hyperlinks that are more descriptive so they can be understood out of context. They can enter into table mode, which is really nice because if you've got a large table with a lot of data cells in there, it's pretty easy to get lost. So if a table is correctly designed, JAWS will announce when you move from one column to another and what the column is. It'll catch that heading at the top. It'll announce when you move from one row to another if there are headings, headers on the left. So it'll help a person keep from getting lost in large tables. They're totally navigable. JAWS is totally navigable by keyboard. Nobody needs to use a mouse at all. And it can help with speech to braille output, which is also a technology that's coming up in big strides. A lot of people are using extensions so that they can just move everything to a printed braille instead of having to use a screen. And it includes scripting language that allows users to automate tasks. It's pretty programmable and customizable. So that's the other thing to think about when you think about, well, how would a screen reader sound No two screen readers are the same. People who use them all the time customize them. So, the best we can do is kind of try to get as much of it as we can covered and rely on the expertise of the screen reader user to kind of fill in the gaps. So, what can JAWS not do? It can't see and interpret images. This is why we have to use alternative text for images. It can't read certain characters very well. Even if you have, a specific language assigned, it doesn't like tildes, it doesn't like the pound sign. There are certain things that kind of trip it up. So when we create alt text for an image or a graph or something like that, we're always trying to be mindful of, how is it going to sound when this screen reader reads it? Do we put a period in a specific spot, even though grammatically we may not, but we want the JAWS screen reader to pause there. So we add different things like that. So it doesn't sound like it's just one big, long, static, never-ending sentence. So it allows us, or actually really kind of requires us to see things in a slightly different way when we create alt text. And then here again, just the basics, the basic keys to think about is styles, structures, and headings. If you're using Word, for example, use those styles and set your headings and all of your styles so that it will create all of those headings for you. And then also it makes it super easy to create a table of contents since you've already got that all set up. But headings, again, have to be set up in a specific way. They have to go down in order, heading 1, 2, 3, 4. They can bounce back up to 1, but they can't skip going down. Because if you're listening to something that JAWS is reading and it says heading 1, it'll give you the title of the document, and then it'll start to read, and then it'll say heading 3, and enter into a new section. That screen reader user is going to wonder what happened to heading 2. They're going to think that material got skipped. So designing web pages and documents with the proper heading structure, just like we kind of were taught to do when we were kids, right? Putting together an outline before we wrote a paper. Same idea. It covers documents, it covers websites, fonts and colors, images and banners. And, Melik knows that a lot of the documents that we produce in our division are very technical and very scientific. And there's a lot of graphs, a ton of tables, a ton of visuals, and they could get really complex really fast. And then it gets really tough because you have to come up with a way to describe that in alt text. And we'll cover that here in a second. So back to the basics. This is the low-hanging fruit right here. If you can capture these 6 things, then, or actually it's 5, sorry, I can't count. If you capture these 5 things, then you really are on your road to being a much more accessible producer of content than you had been in the past. And it seems easy, and it really isn't hard. It really is pretty easy. The basics are easy. So let's take a look at this. If we talk about font size and color, we're going to talk about headings again. We're going to talk about alt text, and we're going to talk a little bit about tables and charts and graphics in specific. So basic formatting. Studies have shown that it is different to read on a screen than it is on a paper. And sans serif fonts work best for computers. So examples would be Arial, Calibri, Tahoma. We use Trebuchet MS. But fonts with a serif, which would be like Times New Roman, tend to be harder for people to read. So we stay away from those. Things we avoid, all caps. It's funny because I went back to finish my degree late in life. I got distracted by other fun stuff. Went back to finish up my degree, and the very first paper I turned in, my title was in all caps because that's the way we used to do it back when I first went to college a long time ago. And it got summarily returned to me. No grade, do it over. And that was the first thing that I was taught was we don't do all caps anymore. And it was a bit of a surprise. But this is the reason. It's more accessible to have those peaks and valleys from the taller letters to the shorter letters, capital letters to lowercase letters. People who have dyslexia in particular tend to have a hard time with all caps, just like they have a hard time if there's an entire paragraph in italics, for example. It gets to be more difficult to read as you go. Um, Underlines. We tend not to underline things anymore because people kind of tend to think it might be a link. So we try to find other ways to make things stand out. We use bold instead. Or we'll actually just make a call out and say, attention, colon, this is it, and leave it at that. Certain colors, of course, like red, without additional information is a bad choice because we have to think about color blindness. And red-green color blindness is the most common type of color blindness. Not that they don't see a color, it's just that each person might see a slightly different kind of color. So they may not recognize it as something that stands out that they should pay more attention to. So again, we are always looking to see if we put something up there, we really want it to stand out. We'll use a little larger font. We'll use a call out word, or we'll use bold. And a lot of times then between that and just using a call out word, you can get the message across, if that makes sense. So kind of breaking some of these older habits. Make your font 12 points as much as you can, and that might be the smallest. It's not a good idea to go down font size to try and make your one pager a one pager. I think those of us who have a background in writing, you always say, well, the executive summary has to only be one page. Well, you know what? The executive summary needs to be as long as it needs to be. And so, unless you're really following some strict guidelines, leave that length to being appropriate to whatever message you're sending and make sure it's just easy to see. And again, good color contrast between things is really important. And it's very surprising how quickly color contrast can fail. You might look at it and think that yellow over the green background really pops and it looks great. But that yellow may be just one shade too dark and then it'll fail. So how do we know? We have to have other tools of the trade. And I'm going to share this with you so you have take advantage of these links. But I go to WebAIM all the time. This right here is the best resource that I found. I'm going to plop that into the chat so you have it right away. This covers everything you need to know as far as digital accessibility is concerned. And it does so in a very accessible, very easy to understand way. The W3C has a great big website and it's very, very intimidating and kind of hard to come up with. Everything is written in legalese and it's very highbrow and it's kind of hard to find stuff in it. This one here is very, very easy to use. And there are all kinds of different things. I've got this one defaulted because of the presentation to how you can test color contrast, for example. But you can actually go and search for just about anything. You can see I've searched for hyperlinks and that sort of thing already here. And this contrast checker works great because what I can do is I'll click on the color and it opens up a little box and I can grab my little eyedropper here and then I can just move it over and say, I'm going to select that color for the foreground. And then I can move this one here and I'm going to select this color for the background. And Here's my example. That's a straight up fail all the way down. And what we're looking for here is normal text, WCAG AA. That's the standard. AAA is like going way beyond the Call of Duty. So we aim for AA. But you can see under normal text, that fails. Large text, it fails. If this were graphic objects, it would fail. Now, obviously, I'm taking something that's, you know, designed to be blurred and it's in the background, but this is an example. So if you say, okay, I really like this color, but I'm probably going to have to go with a darker color and see, here we go. So I can actually use that, which unfortunately just basically looks black, but I got it to pass. So these kinds of tools here are great. Any questions about color? Not yet. Okay.
I have
What about
some.
all?
I can
What's
wait.
that?
I
You
have
okay?
some,
Yeah,
but I can
we'll.
wait till the end.
Okay. So what about alt text? How does alt text work? That is really just giving a description of whatever that image is, and that's what the screen reader will pick up. If you don't have alt text for an image, the screen reader will simply just say image. That's it. So you have to put in something. And this is how come I, wanted to do this kind of presentation or this kind of view, because I could show you all you have to do in almost every kind of application, just left click to select the image, right click, and you've got alt text right here. This is the way Google does it. Microsoft has a different way, but it's still just as easy. And then you just plop your description right in here into the box, hit tab, and you're done. If this happens to be an image that's just there because it's pretty and you don't really need to have that image, then we can either just untag it. We can just not have that in the reading order, and I'll explain how that works in just a sec. Or we would do something like the double quote inside of the text box, which tells the screen reader just to skip it. So there are ways you can go around, kind of work around the images if you don't have to tag them. You don't need to. But if there are images that support whatever message you're driving home here, then it needs to have alt text. So how does that look? Let's do one for this one. So what we have here is the same intersection. And right here is a clip of what actually the alt text looks like when you're using it in Word. And you can see that somebody typed in nightmarish intersection with crosswalks from corner to corner and diagonally. So it gives somebody an idea, clearly at some point you were probably talking about intersections and crosswalks in this document, for example. So it gives somebody an idea of what that image is supporting. And again, we can go straight to WebAIM and talk about all the things that you can add alt text for. So again, we go to WebAIM all the time, but the context of images, how the images are functional or not. Maps are really hard to create alt text for. What do you do with a map? What do you do with these complex figures that you have, your bar graphs and your circle graphs and all kinds of things like that? What do you do if this is really, really so big and has so much information involved? How can you put it all in alt text? You can't. So one of the ways you can go around this is to say, we'll put a caption. As seen in the image above, we consistently grew client wealth by 20% each year. This is another way we can get this done. And what I would do, and I've done this before, would encourage people to say, okay, you know what we're going to do is we're going to put alt text over this graph. And we're going to put alt text in there that says, please refer to the following content or the content above or that kind of thing, so that we can actually just describe it in the content instead of trying to put alt text in. Another one is tables. I want to bring up tables because if you're like me, I used them incorrectly for years and years because I used them for formatting purposes. Makes things nice and easy, looks nice and neat. Everything's on a nice row. And then I would go in and I would make all of the lines in the table go away, make them invisible, and then everything looked really wonderful. But the problem with that is the table still exists in the background. And a screen reader will announce this is a table. But it's really not a table, it's just used for formatting. And that makes it really hard for assistive technology users because the screen reader wants to tackle that in a certain way, and it can't. So again, we have to kind of change the way we work. Tables are for tabular information. So the second example here is a more appropriate situation where I have a top row, which is headings, and then I have the data cells that carry the data. And so when a screen reader goes into table mode, we hit this first cell and it will say first name, Alex. And if I tab over to the next one, it'll say last name, Smith, home phone, and read the number. If I jump down, then it'll say last name, Jones. Everything is relational to the headings. And if you've got a column of headings on the left side, then there's that cross-relational setup that you can have for JAWS so that it won't get lost within the table. So tables can be tricky. We try not to leave empty spaces. We try not to have too much as far as merged cells and that sort of thing. We try to keep them as straightforward as possible because it's that much more difficult for screen reader users to consume. Now let's just play this game. I'm going to make sure that we were all awake. What's wrong with this picture? And I know I just threw a whole bunch of stuff at you. These are just the basic ideas, but just take a look at this real quick. What do we have here that looks like it could be a problem based on what we just talked about? We might have a problem with all caps, right? I think we definitely have a problem with the blue underlined business because that sure looks like a link to me.
I thought it was a link.
Yeah, then they're not. And then this stuff here might be pretty interesting, but it's really hard to read. One, it's tiny. And two, it doesn't seem to be very clear. So here's the other problem with this picture, is that it's actually a picture. And this is something that folks will do. I've done it in the past where you think, okay, I've got this great block of content that I just found somewhere, and I can just take it and make a screenshot of it and plop it into my paper, and it's going to be great. But now a screen reader user isn't going to be able to know what this is. And if you don't tag it, or if you don't put alt text in, what will it do? It'll just simply say it's an image. Problem here is that this is a lot of information to be sticking into alt text. We try to keep our alt text as minimal as possible. So that's really not what alt text is for. So, it was probably really simple, and it took about 30 seconds to gather this, make a screenshot of it, put it in my slide here. But if I had taken the time to type it out, I would have resolved the blue underlined all caps, and I would have also been able to take advantage of all this extra space over here. And so stretching out my sentences across the card, I would be able to increase the size of my font. So a couple of things to think about, just sort of wrapping this up and sort of driving it home. This is kind of a really simple idea of what to look for. So again, these are just the basics, but they get you started, put you in a really good direction. And so how does this affect our work? Well, we've learned the hard way that it affects every last little bit of our work, everything we do. I work with a team that creates we create not just websites and website content, but we create databases. We manage data. We create applications. And some of these applications aren't even public facing, but we still go through every single one of those applications and make them as accessible as possible because we don't know who is going to end up working here. And so we want that to be prepared for them. It touches every single thing we do. And the cool thing is, we've watched staff too kind of work through this in the last 2 or 3 years, and people are starting to really kind of get behind it. And it's kind of nice to see. So if you have interest in working your way into a more digitally accessible content stream, just be aware it never ends. So you can always learn more, and I'm always learning more. And it's never one of those things where it's one and done, it's constant. And that, I hope, was helpful. Can we open it to questions?
Yes, thank you so much, Scott. That was super informational. I learned a ton.
Oh, good.
And I had to look up a few things on our own website. I was like, how do I do alt
Oh,
text? Luckily, I've been doing it because I was like, I think this is something I should do. So,
oh, nice. Yeah.
um, yeah, but I had to look up if they call it description, not alt text. So I'm like, is that the same thing? But it is.
Yeah. Probably. Yeah. Yep. We had to go back through our website as well and do a lot of cleaning up, working with our vendor, you know, making requests and things like that. And it does get a little tricky. We have in our website we have buttons we can use that are sort of like a little bit of interactive. You hover over it and they kind of change. And for whatever reason, our vendor put hard coded a heading level 3 for our buttons. I mean, they're not headings, they're buttons. I don't know why they did it, but really, it really messed things up because then I have to figure out, okay, well, I want to put a button there, but I don't have an H2 above it. So I'm going to fail accessibility, you know?
What about so our website uses if I want to make a button on something, it uses like heading 6 with so I make it a hyperlink something and then I highlight it and make it heading 6. Is that accessible? Would that show up?
If you have, um, do you have other headings?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So the idea behind that really is if you have a heading 6, you have to have headings 1 through 4, 1 through 5.
Oh, all of them to make it.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We were doing that too because the headings that we have for our CMS are huge. And so at the beginning, that's what we were doing. We were like, oh, well, we'll just make it a heading 6 because it looks more reasonable. But all of our pages were failing because we were skipping headings.
Hmm, okay.
So if you start, yeah. So like if in even in a document, let's say the title is an H1, that's actually the standard. We don't use a title tag, we use an H1. And then say the first section has to do with recycling. And so that would be an H2. And then let's say you have sub points under there because you're talking about aluminum and you're talking about whatever. And so each of those sub points would be an H3. And then if you go back from now you're done with that section, you're going to talk about composting, then that's an H2.
Hmm,
And
okay.
then the sub points below that and the sub points below that. So they have to kind of step down in order for it to work for screen readers. Because again, like if a person is using a screen reader and it goes and it'll announce the heading. So it'll announce, heading level 2. And then if it goes to heading level 6, they're going to think there's a whole lot of missing content that I just missed because what happened to all of the other headings in between.
Hmm. So Liz, sounds like we got some work to do with our website, which I've been wanting to make changes, but yeah, the way they've set it up is it's actually funny because I think heading 3 and 4, 4 and 5 are all caps, and it makes everything all caps, which is also I know.
I
I
know. And see,
love.
well, We do it too, and we have a vendor that hard codes all that for us, and it's and I don't know if yours is this way, but if I try to change the size of my headings, then it'll actually break it and it won't
Yeah.
announce it as a heading at all. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, all of a sudden we go down the rabbit holes, and now we were talking about how easy these concepts are, but in real life, it gets messy fast.
Yeah, I was like so excited. I'm like, oh, I think I'm doing okay. And now I'm like, oh, dang it. Now I'm getting better. I'm getting better at the click here kind of things. So it says, email us or this is that resource and whatnot. So,
Yep. And yeah, and I've gotten to where I'm not afraid of creating a hyperlink that's pretty long,
mm, okay.
several words, if it covers the content that I need it to. So to make it clear where that link is going to take somebody, I'll do that.
Do you foresee, like you're saying, your CMS system or platforms like, I mean, we use Google for a lot of our like presentations and slides and documents and like Microsoft as well. And even Canva, I guess, too. Do you foresee them like incorporating like this color accessibility, accessibility as kind of like the standard or like tools for that? I don't know if you've seen anything like that.
They do, they are working toward giving us the tools to make things a little more accessible. Um, but most of the time we rely on outside tools like the WebAIM color contrast checker. There are some plugins that you can get. There's one called the Wave plugin, which let's see what it does right here. So this turns into, there's a lot to digest here, but really this is the summary where it shows, okay, we have one contrast error
Hmm.
on this page, believe it or not. And I'm going to guess, should we guess? For some reason it's saying must be this. So contrast ratio 8.59 to 1. Well, it says it's passing. So I'm not quite sure. This might be a bad example, but now it's failing because I clicked on the error message. So, then I have to find it in here and figure out what it is and fix it. This is kind of nice because it'll show you, how things are stacked up as far as the structure is concerned. It'll look at potential reading order issues, different details as far as multiple form labels. Well, what does that even mean? So I spend a lot of time looking stuff up. You know, I have to figure out what multiple form labels means and why is Google so irritating when it comes to stuff that we can't get in and fix. You know, um, because everything's locked in Google. We use the Drive and we use Word as well. We use both. And oftentimes, what people will do is they'll use the Google Drive to collaborate with others because it's so easy to do. And then once they kind of hit upon the final product, they'll save that as a docx, and then we can remediate it from there. It's a little bit easier. But there's also a program called Grackle that is designed to work in Google Drives, and it's supposed to, and it does a pretty good job, where it will actually take you through a document right there in the Google Drive and show you what needs to be fixed. You do that, and it kind of just take you step by step by step, and then at the end, you have a function there where it will actually turn it into a PDF for you, and probably 95% accurate. So you know, there are applications like that that help out. None of them really are though, like, native to the uh, the software.
Right. Yeah. What about so like we make a couple of like graphics for resources, trying to display. So I got called out on it, which was kind of cool, and this is why it's like kind of triggering all these questions. But it was something where it was like, this is good on this side of the spectrum and this is bad. And in my mind, because I don't have a color impairment, I think red and green, which is not good for red and green color blindness. And you showed us the WebAIM tool for contrast and alt text. Is there a resource you would suggest for, like checking colors and graphics and whatnot? Or like spectrums, I guess?
Yeah, I definitely use that WebAIM.
Okay.
I really do. Now you can also get hex codes from Paint if you want to take a screenshot of something and put it in Paint. Then there's a way you can get a hex code out of picking the colors there. Um, but since I found out about the WebAIM one, I really don't do that anymore because WebAIM is so easy to use.
Is it the contrast checker one? Is that what you would?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the contrast checker. And then also, this is another one of my favorite. Now, you have to be careful because this one, you can tell it to be colorblind safe and print friendly, but it doesn't go all in when it comes to accessibility. So you still have to be kind of careful. But I'll plop this into the chat as well. I encourage people to use Color Brewer because if you have a lot of data points, for example, in a graph, then what you can do is you can say, okay, I have 8 different classes. I have 8 different data points. What Color Brewer does is automatically sets up suggestions for you as far as what contrast colors would work well. And you can pick a color scheme. It'll offer you different ones. You can say, oh, well, I want this to be sequential. Well, all of a sudden, look at this. I have all kinds of new options.
Hmm.
If I want it to be qualitative, it brings it back down to those few. And then you can just export your hex codes if you're looking for, creating a graph or something with colors that look like they have good contrast. And again, I can say I want this to be colorblind safe. Uh-oh, I got nothing. So Color Brewer says if you have to have 8, you know, data points and you want it to be colorblind safe, probably can't go with a qualitative. Can we try a diverging one? There's some. And then again, if you go sequential, you usually get a lot more options because the sequential you can see is almost always going to be pretty close to the same color scheme, just shades of the same. So another thing to be careful about that is is this green right here really a big enough difference from that green for some people to see? Depends on it depends on what you're trying to create. If you've got little tiny lines in your graph, probably won't stand out enough. If you've got thick bars in your graph, it might. So this is a good one to use to kind of help get good ideas as far as creating color contrast.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that's kind of this is like something that would be super helpful for me in terms of I do a lot of graphic design and things on resources. So I just was made aware and I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to find these color schemes? But this is super cool to see that and
Yeah,
even the number of data classes. So sweet.
yeah, it really does help. I mean, in our world, we try to stick with our color palette, but our color palette, unfortunately, was chosen before all of this accessibility stuff came along, and so it's not exactly accessible. So I just show people that one instead. It makes it a little easier.
Yeah, I'd be curious how our website stacks up because it's all our like original logo colors that they picked, I don't know how long ago. And so I'll have to check. It's like a bright blue and then the text is white. So I'm like, oh no.
Maybe, but yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We run with that too. Um, the other thing is that people are really used to seeing flashy websites. And the flashier the website is, the less accessible it is just by default. Can make a website that looks really great with a lot of colors and everything, but you have to really be careful, when you create it that way, which, to be perfectly honest, is one of the reasons why the majority of the web pages I create are fairly straightforward and simple. And I do that for a couple of reasons. One, for accessibility, because the simpler the formatting, the easier it is to make it accessible. And the second reason is because, knowing our audience particularly, they're not there to browse. They're not there to be impressed with that. They need to get that guidance document and move on, or whatever they're doing. So that's kind of how we look at it. But, form follows function. And, looking at your audience is still going to be one of your main duties when you create content. Anything else?
I've had a lot of questions, but if anyone else has any, please feel free to jump in.
Here's what I might do, just because I was mentioning tags. See if I can pull something up really fast to show you how this works. So in Acrobat, if we open up this left panel, you've got this, what looks like a little price tag. Are you familiar with this one? So this is a tags tree. And basically what this is, since this is an electric document or electronic document, it's the same thing as a web page, really. On a web page, you have HTML and CSS, a little bit of JavaScript. That's the language that creates the website. That's actually the language that screen readers will read. They don't read what you see. They read the code that's behind what you see. And this is what happens with a document. So it'll say, this is a figure. And then we have to make sure we have alt text. And then it'll say, this is your H1, and this is an H2, and this is a paragraph. So each one of these dictates to screen readers how to read this document. And this is what we talk about when we say we're going to tag or untag something. So for example, if this happened to be an image, not of a logo, but of something that was just there because we thought it looked cool, it really doesn't support the content at all, you can actually just literally erase that tag, and then a screen reader will never know it's there. So when we talk about tags, tagging is where you begin your accessibility work as far as documents are concerned.
Ours definitely does this, at least. So our website does. So I
Oh, it
know.
does? Oh,
Yes.
that's cool.
Yeah. So that's how I know if it's like H6 is a button and a hyperlink if it's doing it, or image or paragraph is, I think, a lowercase p or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. So
Yep.
yes, I'm
Well,
familiar
that's
with
cool.
that at least.
Oh, that's good. That's one of the questions I get a lot, is like, what are you talking about? What is this tagging thing? So
Yes, thankfully it does that automatically, but our buttons are out of order and I don't use like 3 through 5. So I was like, I don't know what
see, that's the problem. Yeah,
yes.
ours too.
That, like you said, it's a lot of working with the system that we have and reaching out to them and changing that. So, um, yeah, but we're wanting to kind of change things a little bit and make it more flashy, but easier.
Yeah, it is definitely. I mean, this is taken over a lot of my work.
I'm sure.
It's
Yeah.
over a lot of my time.
Yeah. Any other questions that people?
Questions or comments? Anybody? I thought I saw a familiar face here for a second. And then
I think it was
Liz,
Sue.
right?
Oh, and there's Liz.
Yeah.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm at a conference, and so I had to join late, and I will have to go back and watch the recording. But thank you so much, Scott. This is fascinating and oh my gosh, way more in depth than I had any idea.
It
But thank
is.
you.
It
This
is.
is, I think, very helpful. And these tools, you've given us the ability to go fishing and not just given us fish.
Hopefully, yes. That's the big one. I do have a resources page. It's admittedly very small. I can throw these links again into your chat, and I'm willing to share this these slide deck as well. This website here, I think you might find also very helpful. This is actually our state website for the Information Technology Office. But it has a lot of really good information on here, and it should be open. It should be available to the public.
Yep.
Yep, good. So, if you have time, you might want to just kind of sneak around in here and see what all this offers. But there's a lot of good information about how to here with going back to your links and your forms and page structure, etc. Plain language is also tied right into accessibility. So there's another one that is really kind of an art form as much as anything else, is trying to find a way to say complicated things in ways that are not so complicated.
Yes, I think we need that with our,
Yeah.
we heard a lot from our conference that there's a lot of acronyms and then B, just people and introducing. And so it's something we're trying to, at least step one of incorporating that. And maybe somebody had the idea of making an acronym board out in the hallway in between sessions. So you're not like, what did they say? It's like information and you can just like, here, look, this is what all these mean. But we're also going to talk to the speakers and say, like, you can't just say everybody knows Melik because Melik's at X, Y, and Z meeting. You have to say Melik is paid care, stewardship,
Yep.
CPHE. So
Yeah. And that's true. Acronyms and initialisms can get you into trouble fast.
yes, yes. And there's some people who are just diehard Recycle Colorado members, have been here for years and years and years. Everybody knows Liz, everybody knows everyone, but Izzy, this is her first meeting with us. She doesn't know who Melik is. She doesn't know Brian
Mm,
and all the cool work that he does because Brian does so many, many things that I can't even name. So yeah, we're working on it. But I do love
good.
that quote that it does help people even if they don't have a disability, because I think that that's very true.
It is.
Cool.
Definitely.
Any other last minute thoughts, comments?
Thank you, Scott. It was really interesting. I
Good. I'm
didn't,
glad that was helpful.
yeah, I
No,
really like never thought about this stuff before.
I'm hoping that the rest of our membership will tune into this into the recording afterwards, and hopefully at the very least find out what they did not know before and find out what they need to learn more about.
right. Yes, for sure.
Yeah, I
I
think
hope
they'll
so
start
too.
watching and they'll be like, oh my God, why wasn't I there to ask him this question about our website and blah, blah, blah. Well, thank you so much, Scott, for joining us today. And thank you to all of you for also jumping on. Yeah, this will be posted and I will do a social post so you can share it far and wide and share your thoughts in there too. But other than that, Liz and I have to jump to another meeting. So fun to meeting jump. But happy Colorado Recycles Week and tomorrow's America Recycles Day. So everyone make sure you get your social posts and whatnot ready. I know we're all struggling. Liz, I wasn't the only one. Everyone else was like, "Oh my God, that's this week." So just so you know. Liz reminded me. But yeah, other than that, I appreciate all of you guys. Thank you so much for all that you do.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Cool.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. See you guys.